and loads. The interface will be the primary topic of discussion and design in this course. So it will primarily comprise of circuits or electronic circuits that will interface the solar cell to the various loads. However, the central component in all these circuits and applications is the solar cell or the photovoltaic cell. We will not be going much into the physics of the photovoltaic cell or the making of the photovoltaic cell, but we will be looking at it as a two-terminal device, and we would like to characterize and parameterize it as an electrical component, just like any other component that we would buy off the shelf, like the diode or the MOSFET or the VJT. However, it would be interesting to look back and see how this photovoltaic cell came about. A historical perspective about the photovoltaic effect and the photovoltaic cell will be in keeping with the discussions to follow, and it will give us some insight into how the forefathers thought about and how they discovered the principles behind the photovoltaic cell and gave us this wonderful gift, which is the solar cell. We go back to the 19th century. In 1839, it began for photovoltaics. A young boy of 19 years old, Edmund Becquerel, discovered the photovoltaic effect, and it came to be known as the Becquerel effect. He was working in his father's lab, wherein he discovered that when light was shown upon the electrode dipped in an acidic medium, current flows through the electrodes. He later on published the results in the memoirs, and this represents the very first publication on photovoltaic effect. He came to be known as the father of photovoltaics. Now, if you look at his early photovoltaic cell made by Becquerel, Edmund Becquerel, it consists of a container, and it was painted black so that it traps light. It was filled with an acidic solution. It had two electrodes, and the electrodes were coated with silver chloride. He placed a thin membrane in between and connected the external circuit to the two electrodes in this fashion. And then he showed light onto the electrodes, and he found that there was an electric current flowing through the external circuit on the application of light. He experimented with blue light, ultraviolet light, and sunlight, and recorded his observations on all these things. So this was the earliest photovoltaic cell that you can find. From 1839 to 1877, there was not much action on this topic. Not much research work was carried on, or at least not reported. So the first publication after 1839 was in 1877, 35 years after the discovery of the photovoltaic effect. Adams and Day published in the Royal Society, Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society of London, the action of light on selenium, wherein it is described the selenium photovoltaic cell. So they actually borrow on the discovery of Willoughby Smith that when an electric current was passing through a bar of crystalline selenium, its resistance was less when the bar was exposed to the action of light than it was when the bar was kept in the dark. So following on this principle, Adams and Day made a selenium photovoltaic cell. So they used vitreous selenium, and to that the electrodes, the platinum electrodes were attached. It was encased in a glass tube, and the light was made to be incident on the selenium through the glass tube, and they observe the current flowing through the electrodes and the external circuit. So this was the selenium photovoltaic cell. In 1883, 5 years later, Fritz published in the American Journal of Science on a new form of selenium photocell. So this was the first thin film selenium solar cell. So he described this first thin film selenium solar cell. It consists of a metal substrate. He used brass, 25 micron selenium layer, molten selenium was pressed in between two metal sheets, and the top layer was a gold leaf, a very thin semi-transparent gold layer to which were attached the two contacts to which the external circuit could be connected. And when light was made to fall on the selenium through the semi-transparent metal, there was electric current that flowed through the contacts and the external circuit. The Fritz thin film selenium solar cell, even though it was demonstrated and performed well, the researchers were skeptical about it. Even though the experiments were reproducible and repeatable, they were not clear about the theory. Because at that time, the classical physics was not able to answer the underlying theoretical principles of the operation of the solar cell. In 1900, something revolutionary happened. It was the birth of quantum mechanics. On December 17, 1900, the German physicist Max Planck, he reported to a meeting to the Berlin Academy of Sciences Physical Society on the problem that he was facing in the thermal radiation issue. He could not find any solution to his problem from the traditional classical physics. And he tried to introduce a totally new concept, the concept of quanta. So Max Planck introduced this very famous equation, now famous equation, where energy is quantized, and here it's proportional to the frequency, and h is a Planck's constant. So at that moment, at that point in time, discretization of energy or energy in discrete form was not imaginable. Classical physics wouldn't allow it, but Max Planck, with his seminal ideas at that point in time, introduced the concept of energy packets or the quanta. And this was the starting point for amazing discoveries far beyond the imagination of even science fiction writers. The work of Max Planck foreshadowed all the development of physics for many years to come. So this was the contribution of Max Planck. He gave us a window to a totally new world of ultrasound. So we had this quantum mechanics, the birth of quantum mechanics, right at the beginning of the 20th century. So sometime in 1905, at that time, a relatively unknown person, Albert Einstein, published an article in the Annalen der Physik, and there he explains the concept of photon packets, light packets, or the light quanta called photon. And through this mechanism platform, he explains the photovoltaic principle in the photovoltaic mechanism completely, and that laid the foundation for even the semiconductor industry. In 1933, Gromdahl worked and published many articles on copper cuprous oxide solar cell. And he published numerous papers, out of which this particular article in 1932, the copper cuprous oxide rectifier and photoelectric cell, gives great detail into the manufacturing process of the photoelectric or the solar cell. This copper cuprous oxide solar cell became quite popular because of its low cost of production. Then later in 1941, Wolf made the first patent for a silicon solar cell. Silicon solar US patent was made in 1941. So it was a light sensitive electric device including silicon. This silicon solar cell had an efficiency of much less than 1%. It did not have much commercial value or commercial implication, but it was a landmark point as far as the solar cell or the photovoltaic cell was concerned. It was a very important point in history. In 1954, Chapin, Fuller, and Pearson published in the Journal of Applied Physics a solar cell, silicon solar cell, semiconductor solar cell, having an efficiency of 6%. Fuller and Pearson were employees of the Bell Labs. This was an offshoot of an observation that the Bell Labs silicon diode produced significant amount of current and voltage in the presence of light. So this was brought forth into a commercial product when the first silicon photovoltaic cell with an efficiency of 6% was developed. So this was the beginning of the silicon photovoltaic cell. From then on, there were rapid improvements, and then you had a host of solar cells that have been developed. So if you see the top three, these are the mainstays the monocrystalline, polycrystalline, thin film silicon solar cells. You see that the monocrystalline silicon solar cell has an efficiency of 20% today. They are the most efficient. Polycrystalline solar cells reaching about 18%. So also the thin film solar cells.
Hello? Hello?
हेलो
हाँ
हाँ
कॉल आपने किया
है
कॉल आपने किया ना
हेलो
Another group of cells here which are at the research level, not in commercial installations. Gallium arsenide germanium solar cell having efficiency of up to 30%. Copper indium gallium selenide solar cell 21% efficient. Cadmium telluride solar cell again 21%. Amorphous silicon solar cell having efficiency of 10% but very low production cost. Dye-sensitized solar cell around 11%. You also have organic solar cell having efficiency of 8%. They are low cost cells. Multi-junction solar cell, indium gallium phosphide, gallium arsenide, indium gallium arsenide. They have a very high efficiency of 37%. Again, all these at the laboratory reportage level. In future, I think one should look out for perovskite solar cell. Perovskite is a material which is coated on top of silicon solar cells to improve the efficiency. It improves by another 5%. Quantum dot solar cells. These are something that will start coming in the near future, and they are supposed to be high efficiency solar cells. The early solar cells were used for telephone repeaters, and the earliest popular application was space application. The Vanguard 1 satellite in 1958 was launched with 6 silicon cell panels of having a power of 5 milliwatt. The silicon cells were placed here in these notches 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6th one in the back. So this is the Vanguard satellite. When the battery stopped operating, after a few months, the PV source continued to operate the transmitter for over 6-year life of the satellite. This in fact was a very great success for the photovoltaic cell. Nowadays, the photovoltaic cell is being populated on rooftops to power the homes, buildings, and communities. This is one of the more recent application of the photovoltaic cell. This is a place in Tamil Nadu, Kamudi. This is the world's largest solar array at the time of this recording. So this is a phenomenal 648 megawatt solar power. It's been a long journey for the photovoltaic cell, about 180 years, from 1839, from the time Edmund Becquerel discovered photovoltaic effect, till today, when we see high efficiency semiconductor silicon solar cells powering many roofs, many communities. And as you see here, the 640 megawatt stations. So now the photovoltaic cell is poised to power or to become the electric power supply for this planet.